Oh, good morning. Have you ever been dumped? Dumped by a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or for that matter, a husband or a wife. Have you ever been dumped? And does it feel pleasant? Well, there was a 35-year-old woman who had been dumped by her boyfriend, and after having a pity party for about a week, she started to move forward with her life. She booked a chance to go to a retreat near Big Sur, California. If you've ever been up there, it's just beautiful. She met a really cute guy. And they decided, the guy talked her into coming up to one of the massage rooms which overlooked the cliffs, and you could hear the waves crashing in. And they watched the sunset together, and it got very cold. It was April, and they were both kind of chilled, but they laid down on a mat in the massage room, kept each other warm, fell asleep, and in the morning, as they woke up, they saw that next to them there in the massage room was a space heater. Could have kept them warm all night. And a lot of us find that spirit is like that. It's there the whole time. We just don't realize it. We just don't turn it on to provide what it is that we need. Now, those of you who've already read the preface of the book that we're starting to study today, E Squared, recognize that this is a story by the author Pam Grout. I'm going to ask Candy to put up the first slide of the cover there. From time to time, I talk about Unity's 5 principles, and that's on the next slide. It's God, you, thought, word, and deed. God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and everywhere present, and God is good. You is that you have this presence of God already in you, in every cell of your body. It's just a matter of are you awake to it or not. Thought. Our thoughts are things they actually create. The energy of our thoughts, especially our belief systems, create our experience. Word, our spoken word, actually moves that substance into what it is that we need. And then deed, that we need to put these principles into action. I've seen people who've been coming to Unity for years, but they've never really put these spiritual principles to use. So those of you who are going to be looking or reading the book E Squared with us here over these next few weeks, you'll see that Pam Grout's principles are very similar. Thoughts create our reality. Sure enough, that's like number 3. There's a power in the universe that supports you in your every desire and can heal everything. Well, that's principle number 1. And you alone design your life, which is number 5. Now, Pam Grout actually goes to Unity, and yet she's this author who's written like 16 books. She's written TV shows, and she's a screenwriter, and she's based in Lawrence, Kansas. Now, Lawrence, Kansas is pretty similar to Bloomington, Indiana. It's about, maybe a 45-minute drive west of Kansas City, and it's where the University of Kansas is. And she is a very successful writer living in Little Lawrence, Kansas. And so she got very excited about Unity's principles and decided, well, how can I put this into good church-leave English and appeal to people who are perhaps agnostic or have had religious abuse in their past and know that whatever they did before didn't work. The basic concept is that there is an energy field underneath everything. Now, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore started the Unity movement 125 years ago. And what Charles started to talk about was this energy field, and everybody back then thought he was nuts. Now, 125 years later, quantum physics is proving that everything he was saying was true. And it works every time. In Unity, we call it spiritual substance. It can be molded. It can be shaped by our imagination, by speaking forth the word. It seems like movies like the Harry Potter and all this with the magic has a resonance with us because it's like there's something there. It doesn't work perhaps the way Harry Potter works it, but we do have the ability to manipulate energy. In fact, everything that looks solid around us is actually just vibrating energy and light waves. So in the book, she talks about the field of potential, which she shortens to FP. And that's just like spiritual substance. There's this energy field of potential. It can be made into anything. It's like, well, in unity we talk about spiritual laws, and spiritual laws always work. It's the law of mind action. If you believe, then you can achieve. So if you believe that they don't work, you can actually, if you want to, prove that they don't work. But when you're able to shift that thought and realize, well, wait a minute, have I ever truly put it to the test? It's like, spiritual law is like the law of gravity. It doesn't matter, what I hold out here in my hand. Like right now I'm holding a pen. If I let go of this pen, it drops to the floor. Gravity doesn't care if you've been good or bad. Gravity doesn't care if you're rich or poor. Gravity always works, and spiritual law always works. Albert Einstein wrote that everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man. This book, E Squared, is full of all kinds of quotes. One is from Michelle Longo O'Donnell. She's an author, and she said, "The way we have been perceiving life needs to be rolled away so that which is true can appear." So that which is true can appear. See, the challenge is we build belief systems very early in life. If perhaps we've tried something, we failed, we decide not to do it again. And yet you look at so many of the successful people in the world who've had a quote-unquote failure, which really it was a learning experience. They were able to learn by doing it the wrong way. I've used the story several times about my dad, raised 4 children. And he said, "I've learned that you can tell your small child that the oven is hot, but until they actually touch it and feel that it is hot, they're not going to get it." And so we all are on a journey to get it. Thoughts create our physical reality, or more accurately, our beliefs. If we have a belief system that it's got to be a particular way, or if we have a belief system that all men are like this, or all women are like this. Isn't it fascinating how every man or every woman who's like that comes into your life and causes you challenges? Some discover unity and they'll put something into practice and they'll go, wow, this actually works. But then those old recordings in your mind, those old ways of doing things start to creep and say, it was a fluke. Couldn't possibly happen again. And these are the kinds of negative thinking, or as, of course, in the 12th step they talk about stinking thinking. Those old waves, those old beliefs. We need to just release it. And so what I've discovered is, since working with the unity principles since the 1980s, is that it was a process over time of being able to let go of that old negative thinking and really embrace the spiritual truth. Now, neuroscientists tell us that 95% of our thought patterns have been created by the time we're age 5. 95% of our thought patterns are created before the age of 5. As we're born, we come into this world, we start to experiment what works and what doesn't work. One baby cries and mom comes and picks up the baby right away, so the baby knows all it has to do is cry and mom will come right away. Another baby will cry and is totally ignored by mother. They'll try it a few times, doesn't work. Okay, that doesn't work, I'll have to try something different. Each one of you built those patterns. And it's funny because in our brains, I guess these neurons just start to connect with each other and set up almost like a little roadmap of what we have as what we believe about the world. So one of the challenges is, can we let go of that old way? The author Anne Lamott joked, "My mind is a neighborhood I try not to go into alone." But we can actually rewire our brain. We can actually, by thinking in a new way, build new neural pathways. We can erase those old recordings. We can create our experience, or As in unity, we say co-create, because we are part of something much larger than ourselves. So we move through faith, and our faith can only truly be effective when it's placed in God or Spirit or the creative unconscious, whatever you want to call this amazing field of energy underneath everything. We develop a consciousness. The word consciousness has been used a lot over the years in unity. What it essentially means is the awareness of everything. And so we have this ever-growing awareness that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. No need to be more spiritual. You're already a spiritual being. So this book, E Squared, very funny, very well written. She walks us through 9 chapters, which she calls the 9 experiments. Each of the, just about every experiment you can complete in 48 hours. Sound good? Scientific experiments are things that we try and see if it works. In the scientific theory, sure enough, you find that no matter how many times you do it, it can work. Like gravity is still technically a theory. We know it works, we just don't know exactly how. Yet, we can always trust that gravity is there. It always works, right? Charles Fillmore, as he was exploring the spiritual realm, talked about, if spiritual law and if these principles aren't provable, then they're of no use to us. Now, as I mentioned, our thoughts are things, our belief systems create, because we seem to send out what could be likened to radio signals. If we send out a thought wave of a need that we have, if we're open and receptive, sure enough, the way to fill that need appears in the world through a person. Usually it's a coincidence. If you need more money, you're not going to pray and find that there's a basket of cash sitting outside your front door. But there will be a coincidence. Some unexpected financial substance is going to come into your life. We've been creating our reality since birth. It's just a lot of us have been sleepwalking. So we need to wake up and get specific. Now, I know many of you shop on Amazon, and of course you type in smile.amazon.com and choose Unity of Indianapolis as your beneficiary of the percentage that Amazon will give to a not-for-profit. So let's say you go on to amazon.com and you type in the box, send me anything you'd like. How do you think Amazon would respond? Well, that's how Spirit often responds. So get clear. If you recognize that you have a passion for something, it's not just a whim, but a passion. This is what I've got to do. I don't know how it's going to happen. I'm not even quite sure why it's going to happen sometimes, but I know that this is what I have to do. I have to be a unity minister. That was with me there for several years until I finally listened to it. And I was scared. How possibly can I do this? And what does it pay? All of these things, start to work against perhaps that amazing divine idea that you have. So which areas of your life would you like to see positive change in? Is it your health? Is it your occupation? Are you truly doing something you like to do, let alone love to do every day? What about your relationships? Do you have good, harmonious relationships? Not only your business relationships, your personal relationships, and that one special person so many of us want to have in our lives. And what about your finances? Is there a financial supply that allows you to meet all your needs, fulfill all your obligations, and demonstrate your desires? I think I'm going to have Candy put up the next slide here. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through these 9 experiments. I won't go into much depth. You'll see that they all have pretty clever titles to them. You can discover them with us by going through the book. Now, obviously, we've got some small groups that are going to be meeting, groups of about, say, 8 people, to walk through each of these together over the coming weeks. But if you want to do this alone, by all means, I encourage you to do it. So, the first is the dude abides principle. And as Pam Grott says, this underlies everything else in the book. There's as I've just been describing, there's an invisible energy force, which we call the field of potentiality, or the FP. Number 2 is the Volkswagen Jetta principle. And that is, whatever you think about, you draw to you. She describes about how she decided she wanted to buy a Volkswagen Jetta. And all of a sudden, she started noticing Volkswagen Jettas everywhere because she had an awareness of Volkswagen Jettas. The Einstein principle. We are moving waves of energy, not solid matter. Number 4 is the abracadabra principle. Whatever we focus on expands. Well, where have you heard that before? We need to train our mind, though, to focus, not to wander, and to focus on what it is we want to demonstrate. Now, most of the people in this room are masters of focusing on worry. And when you worry, what do you get? You get what you're worrying about, or more things to worry about. So, we need to focus, people. Focus! Number 5 is the Dear Abby principle. Your connection to the field of potentiality provides accurate and unlimited guidance. Number 6 is the superhero principle. Our thoughts and consciousness indeed impact matter. We can set an intention, and sure enough, the molecules of the universe will form into what it is we're looking to experience in our lives. The Jenny Craig principle. Our thoughts and consciousness provide the scaffolding for our physical bodies. And in this chapter, she actually talks about an effective way to lose weight. Of course, we don't want to lose something because then we have the propensity to want to find whatever is lost. So perhaps we just want to drop unwanted poundage. Number 8, the 101 Dalmatians principle. In this chapter, she talks about how we're connected to everything and everyone else in the universe. And physical scientists talk about how when they break, say, particles apart, that even if one's over here and one's over here, if there's a change in this one, there's a change in this one. How does that happen? It's because there's a spiritual connection. If these things have been part of one another. It's like you always hear about identical twins. It's like they can almost feel what's happening to the other twin, even if the other twin lives halfway around the world. And then number 9 is the fish and loaves principle. The universe is limitless, abundant, and strangely accommodating. And of course, last year during our 100th anniversary, we talked about how out there in our foyer, our fountain room, inlaid in the tile there are the loaves and fishes. Because Charles Roth, who was the minister here when we built this building, had been to that church in Israel that's near where they think the loaves and fishes thing happened. And he said, I want this congregation to always be prosperous. So, unity teaches that we need to look beyond outer appearances. Our physical 5 senses indeed give us data, but we always know that we have a 6th sense. And have you ever thought about maybe you have more than 6 senses? But there's something else out there. Our intuition tells us that there's something more. Gary Zukov, the author of Seat of the Soul, who also has strong connections with unity, says from the perception of the 5-sensory human, we're alone in the universe. But as a spiritual being having a human experience, we realize we are part of the universe. A very important part. You would not be here if you did not have a role to play in making this world a better place. And I believe that the reason we are here is because we have an amazing capacity to see the best in each other, to bring out the best in each other. Because you probably suffer from the same challenge I do, and that is, I sometimes feel unworthy. I don't feel good enough at times, especially when things get a little tough. So we can use our thoughts and feelings and consciousness and mold spiritual substance. I remember in a heart-centered metaphysics class I did a couple years ago, I talked about, it's kind of like spiritual Play-Doh. As we're kids, we play with Play-Doh, make whatever it is we want, whatever we can dream of. So we can't always get what we want, but I'll guarantee you that you will always get what you expect. So, do you have low expectations or high expectations? These are repeatable experiments. The key for us is to really put our belief in spirit. How many of you have a cable TV or dish TV? How many channels do you have? 300, 400? How many channels can you watch at once? Isn't that amazing when you think about it? Well, in the book, the author points out that our brain is a remarkable processor. And through the study of the brain, we've discovered that we can receive bits of information. In fact, in every second, your brain can receive 400 billion bits of information. 400 billion. You know what that's? If you were to take, if you wanted to type a 0, a typical, say, 12-point font 0, and you were to print them in your average-sized book, it would take 600,000 books for you to print 400 billion zeros. Now, in the first couple of years of your life, you are tuned into that stuff. But to maintain your sanity, we figure out how to filter out the things that we don't need to be paying attention to. We learn to filter out those 300 or 400 other channels so that we can focus on the channel that we seem to be experiencing. And the scientists tell us we filter it down to about 2,000 bits per second, which is just remarkable. That's 1/2 of 1/1,000,000th of a percent that we filter it down to. The thing is that once we have had a certain experience, we prefer to start repeating that experience. Any of you with a small child, have you noticed how often they want to watch the DVD of Frozen? You know, for a kid, there's a comfort in, oh yeah, okay, if I do this, this happens. If I do this, this happens. Sure enough, every time it happens. But how many times does the child say, what if I do this and this happens instead? So in our early life, we like to set up the dependability, the comfort zone. We tend to choose a preconceived idea. So we have this drastically reduced and condensed thing that we call reality. This is our reality. The problem is there's a whole bunch of realities out there. And I found many times when someone says, well, I have to face reality, so what they're really saying is, I don't believe this spiritual law stuff works. Joseph Campbell, in his Power of Myth interviews, talked about some of the early experiments in the 1950s and 60s with lysergic acid diethylamide, better known as LSD, or dropping acid, as they used to call it. And he described this one where they had volunteers who would agree to take LSD. They found these 4 bridge players. They loved the card game bridge. You know, that they knew how to focus on that. So they're on the card table, and Campbell says they gave them the very tiniest dose of LSD. And he said in a couple of minutes, these bridge fiends, the people who had played bridge for like 10 hours, just sat there fascinated. They were seeing things that they had never seen before. The cards that they had always played bridge for looked so much different. They were just captivated by the amazing universe around them. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, there were some people that believed that LSD could help you have a spiritual experience. You could break through it. What it really did was it tore away all of those filters I was talking about a minute ago. Suddenly, all of these bits of information are coming into the mind. You're like, I didn't know these were here. Well, yes, you did. You just filtered them all out. On page 9 of the book, Pam Grout writes, the roads and highways of our brains get set up pretty early. When we're born, every possibility exists. Let's take language. For example, within every newborn is the ability to pronounce every sound in the English language, or for that matter, in every single language on the face of the earth and beyond. The potential is there for the rolling R of the Spanish language. It's also there for the guttural German diphthongs. So she points out that here again, we pick, we focus, we choose. And now, of course, what they say is what we really should be doing is when our kids come into kindergarten, give them a chance to learn as many languages as they want. Because at that point, you can just take it and you build those neural pathways. I know I've got a distant cousin, who had a child that kid knows 6 languages because he learned them all like before he was the age of 6. Quote from the author Tama Keeves. He says, "We live in a world that worships limitations." You think about that for a minute. Yeah, it's so easy. Of course, it's the hackneyed phrase of think outside the box, but we build our box. And stepping out of that box can be pretty scary. Starting on page 12 of the book, she talks about why is it that we repeat these unpleasant experiences? Why? If we can have a better life, why do we repeat this stuff? Well, Albert Einstein says insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So Pam Grott says, number one is we're not really here. We're not really in the moment. How many times are your thoughts wandering somewhere? How many times have your thoughts wandered since I started this Sunday lesson? Right? And those of you who've prayed with me know that I open all my prayers. I say, okay, let's take a nice deep breath, get centered. Let's let go of all of the thoughts about the past. Let's let go of all of the concerns about the future and just be in this moment. And in this moment, it feels much different. Suddenly we're connected to the omnipotence, the omnipresence. God is all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere present. Suddenly we feel that power. And if we drop the delusions, we know that we were part of that power. So that's the place from which we pray. We don't pray to a God, we pray from God, inside that amazing spiritual energy. Number two, Pam Grott says, we've decided it's too difficult. It's just too difficult. In the Gospel of John, 5th chapter, 2nd verse, Jesus comes upon the pool of Bethesda. This is a healing center. And he comes in and he finds the guy who we're told in the Gospel has been lying there for 38 years waiting for healing. But to be healed, you need to jump in the water as soon as the wind makes a ripple on the water. And he's paralyzed sitting on a pallet, as they call it, or a mat. And Jesus walks up to the man and he says, "Do you want to be healed?" Now, just picture for a moment a manifestation of Jesus coming to you and say, "Do you want to be healed?" What would you answer? Well, this guy says, "Well, yeah, I'd like to be, but, there's nobody here to pick me up and put me in the pool." And Jesus looks at him again, pauses, and says, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." And instantly, the guy gets up and picks up his mat and walks. It can happen instantaneously, provided we have that awareness. Now, the funny thing about us, and even with me sometimes, is I walk into the pool of Bethesda and I say to the guy, "Do you want to be healed?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, what you need to do is work with these denials and affirmations, study this book for about 10 weeks, and then maybe you'll be healed." Now, is it possible that it can happen instantaneously? What is it that you'd like to see happen instantaneously in your life? And what are the thought patterns that are trying to convince you that it can't happen? Those are the things you need to release. You need to focus, people. Focus. Number three, we stalk negativity. You notice how people always prepare for the worst? And she talks about how much scientific data is done on illness, disease, problems, disasters. Even with prosperity and financial supply, I see people always preparing for the worst. They're always looking at the negativity in the numbers. If there's a downward trend, does the trend have to continue? Or can you release it? In Carlos and my life, we found early on, that's why we became prosperity teachers in the 1990s. It's so easy to say, well, this is the way it's always been in my finances. Or then you start to worry and start to think, oh God, what if there is not enough money to pay this bill? And I realize that that's where I have to let go. I'm putting my focus on the wrong thing. I need to focus on the spiritual substance that is there. If there is a need, it can and will be fulfilled, assuming you believe it can. Number four, she says, why do we keep repeating the unpleasant stuff? By George, we think we've got it. Once we have defined something or set up that pattern, we're going to repeat it. It becomes our reality. Number 5, the mind is so powerful it can create something outside itself to be more powerful. And the author says that is why it's essential when doing these experiments to suspend your judgment and condemnation long enough to believe they work. So just through the process, just open your mind to the possibility that this works, and let the Holy Spirit take it the rest of the way. And number 6 of her 6 reasons why we keep repeating the negative is we haven't practiced. It's not an intellectual exercise, it is a practice. And over time what I found is where I seemed to, early on when I first came to Unity, I probably thought negative 70% of the time. Now I'm down to about maybe 35%. Once I crossed the 50% mark, though, boy, what a difference. So the thoughts are there. I mean, they still surface. I mean, here in December, we had a meeting where we talked about the finances of the church and the revenues last year. And then I start beating myself up. It's like, what did I do wrong? It's like, well, perhaps I didn't do anything wrong. We always had enough financial resources to pay every bill on time. But we can't repeat what we did last year. We now have to let go of it and recognize that, like our vision statement says, we are a thriving spiritual community. So the title of the book, E Squared, is actually a play on the E equals mc squared by Albert Einstein. Energy is mass plus the speed of light. Check it out on Wikipedia. I can't explain it, but it's there. So she plays on that thing, E equals mc squared. But what about E squared? Energy doubled. Quantum physics tells us that everything is made up of particles of energy, not solid matter. The Gospel of John, 14th chapter, 12th verse. Well, let me pause for a moment. If any of you have read the Gospels, do you believe that Jesus was a master at being able to use this energy to create what was needed? Do you believe that he could heal the sick? Do you believe that he could manifest whatever was needed, the loaves and fishes? When they had to pay the taxes, telling Peter how to get the money to pay the taxes. Well, in the 14th chapter of John, 12th through 14th verse, speaking as the divine presence, Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me, the divine presence, will also do the works that I do. In fact, will do greater works than these. If in my name you ask for anything, I will do it." The field of potentiality will respond instantly. But sometimes it can take some time. But time and space are optical illusions. I have found that there's some things in my life that can happen instantly. There's some that take a little time. There's some that might take a long time. But if I am persistent through all of that, that indeed I'll have the demonstration that I want. To become a Unity minister, it wasn't instantaneous. I had to take all of the adult education courses to make sure that I was qualified to get into the seminary. And then you go into the seminary. You have to get accepted into the seminary, and you have to spend 3 years there in the seminary, to learn all of the various aspects, or at least a good overview of what you'll need to know to become a Unity minister. And then you have to go out there and do it. So you have all probably had very similar experiences in your life. But you play the game, well, we've always done it that way, or this is the way it's always been. If I had done that, first of all, I never would have become a radio and TV journalist and done that for 17 years. And then to have the courage to just step away from that and be willing to do this. So are you willing to prove that your past experiences are wrong? You don't have to keep doing it that way. When Carla and I came here 4 years ago, in fact, it'll be 4 years this next Sunday that Carla and I have come here. We came with an intention, with a knowing that this would be a thriving, prosperous spiritual community. Each one of you, each individual in you, are going to have all of your needs met, your obligations fulfilled, and your desires demonstrated. And we as a spiritual community are going to do the same. And that's why I am just so excited about this book. And I really hope that you pick it up or even borrow it from the library. It's been a New York Times bestseller now for some time because it shows how science and spirituality are not two separate things. They work together. They work together. Next week, we'll begin with chapter number 1, or as she calls it, experiment number 1, the dude abides principle. So in your small groups or independent study, make sure you read through that first chapter. In preparation, Pam Grout sent me a test to give you. Do you believe that you're a creative person? Now, she says, if you don't believe you're a creative person, or better, let's put it this way. Are you a creative person? The question to answer is, are you breathing right now? If you're breathing, you are a creative person. So even if you haven't cracked open the book yet, can you be open to the possibility that you will be able to use your special gifts, passions, and talents to somehow this week make this world a better place? Have some fun. Maybe break out of the box and reawakening your creativity. Go buy a coloring book and some crayons. Remember how much fun that was when you were a kid? I mean, just start to get that inner child energy going again. Just be willing to have the field of potentiality, or as I'd like to call it, the Holy Spirit, do its amazing work. Now, remember earlier when I said if we convince ourselves that this is the way it always has to be, that we'll start repeating that? Our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News about a group of women who blew away low expectations.
Intensity, desire, heart, gut.
Since 2011,
Lady!
the Climax Fisher High School Lady Knights have been on a streak,
Rip through!
booting and bobbling their way into the record books.
Oh.
This team from western Minnesota
Pitch it!
somehow strung together 84 straight losses.
Down belly!
That's 4 straight years
Oh.
of ridicule.
People always make fun of you.
It's honestly embarrassing to lose that many games.
We lost a game, it's 90-3. But those kids played like it's 5-5.
Jonathan Bonish is their coach.
You're impressed with them?
Absolutely. They're going to be in there.
Jonathan says a few girls have quit, but the ones that remain are more determined than ever to turn this team around.
See if they can make an outside shot.
Which is why it was so heartening to see what happened last month. In their game against Bagley High School, the Climax Fisher Lady Knights, in white, got off to one of their best starts in recent memory. At halftime, they were actually leading by a point.
I just felt like, wow, we are in this.
And the crowd was getting into it, which made it even better. Really in the zone.
And then things went really wrong.
Really wrong, yeah.
Unfortunately, in the second half, they got in major foul trouble.
Oh my God!
One by one, their seniors fouled out of the game. All of them. Before it was over, the juniors would be gone too. In fact, for the last 3 minutes, they only had 3 girls left. 2 sophomores and a freshman. The most inexperienced players on the losingest team in the state.
Are you telling them we can win this?
Well,
You didn't want to lie to them.
I don't think I used that term. I said, but you continue working to the end.
And that's really all their coach was expecting, a valiant effort. Can't win 3-on-5. In fact, they didn't score once from the field, but they did play stellar defense. And when they did get the ball, they were able to draw some fouls. And when they did draw those fouls, they made those free throws. Enough of them that when the buzzer sounded, the Lady Knights of Climax Fisher were on a new streak.
We were all hugging and crying and screaming our heads off.
It's probably the best moment of my life.
And whether they ever win another game or not, they will never be the same team again.
You kind of learn, no matter what people say about you, if you keep putting in the time and effort, that it will pay off.
And there's a lesson that will last a lot longer than a basketball season. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Climax, Minnesota.
Gospel of John, 5th chapter, 6th verse. When Jesus saw him and knew that he had been lying there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool. Jesus said to him, Rise, take up your mat, and walk. And at once the man was healed. He took up his mat and walked. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It's now time for our tithes and offerings. So let's start this very moment with financial supply. If you are uncomfortable with what your checking account says today, or how much money you have carrying in your pocket, can you release the anxiety? Just for this very moment, feel what it feels like to be rich. Feel what it feels like to have all the money that you need. Open your heart and just pour love into what it is you choose to give today. If you give electronically on our website, on the donation tab, just hold the amount that you give there in your mind now. Let's say the affirmation on the screen together. Divine love, through me, blesses and